Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the second episode of Convo, a talk show where we interview industry experts from various fields. I'm Himanshu Sharma.
And I'm Bhuvi Pandey.
For today's episode, we are going to look for some expert advice on a topic which forms the very basis of the industries and the corporate world innovation. For this, we have with us Mr. Manish Bhatia, Managing Director and CEO of DIC India. Here's what you can expect.
I think movie most companies follow what, in my terminology, I call a $1 innovation. So typically, what they do is they create an innovation by spending a dollar and earn $2 out of it. So typically, that is how they create value for themselves. We also had another product which we call it washable 3-in-1. So very simply, we gave him a kit. In that kit, the paint was done, and we gave him two things. We gave him a sauce pouch, and we gave him a lipstick. And we told him that if you take a normal paint and put it, if you ever rub, lipstick stains never go away, or the sauce stains go very difficult. But if you just rub, it will go delivered. So what we tried to do was convert science, use science knowledge, because this is all chemical industry knowledge, which is converted to a consumer.
Thank you so much for being with her today, Mr. Bhatia. So, first of all, I'd like to start with a small introduction. Mr. Bhatia began his career with ICI India. Later, he worked with AkzoNobel, where he contributed immensely on various aspects of sales, marketing, innovation, and change management. During his years there, he was involved in several business and brand strategy projects. He was also the president of Hindware, and under his leadership, Hindware won the Good Homes Award in Innovation. Currently, he is the managing director and CEO of DIC India and is skilled in managing a complex business environment and coming up with innovative solutions to refine the quality of any task undertaken.
Wow, such an amazing portfolio. So you have been known for your innovative thinking, and Hindware has also won Good Homes Award in innovation under your leadership. Could you please give an instance in your life where innovative thinking or an innovative idea was the reason that changed your life?
So, Himanshu, that's a so Himanshu, I think we let's first understand what innovation is. We often make a broad, you know, we all get very excited when something innovative happens, but most humans innovate every day in the life for something or the other. As simple as the way you would use a knife to cut a vegetable so that you do not pierce your hand is itself an innovation itself. And in corporate world, normally what you call as blue ocean innovations or innovations which are completely out of the box are rare. It is the red ocean innovations or innovations which are incremental innovations which often provide you a lot of success. Uh, but since you've asked me an example, and there are quite a few, I'll try and give you an example in my early days in the paint industry. So it's when typically the biggest problem when you sell a wall paint is difficult for anybody to demonstrate how this product would look when the product is done. Because when you buy, so as a consumer, you're buying a finished paint wall, but what a company is selling you is a can of paint. So there is a difference between the two. Our expectations and delivery are different. So we had a paint which was introduced in the market. Basically, if you ever travel to Mumbai or western part of India, you see a lot of hairline cracks on the wall, which do not look nice. Even in Delhi, it is there. So we launched a paint which had a stretchable film. So paint, if you take a paint patch, it breaks into two. It is very brittle, but it was a flexible paint film which would work like an elastomeric rubber or something like a rubber, which will expand and contract and not allow the water to go in. So to give you a very, very basic concept. Now, we wanted to bring this concept alive to a painter who will explain to consumers like you and me or your families who technically know more about science than the painter, right? So what we did was that we created two concepts. One concept was we actually painted the paint on a art paper to create thick films, and this film was a very low cost marketing design tool which a painter could carry, and if a consumer asked him what is USP of a product, he would just stretch the film. And we made this film by millions, so a painter could carry 50 in a pocket. So I think this was a communication innovation and a science innovation which was dovetailed into one, and allowed the painter to sort of communicate the what would call as the USP of the product. So this was one. Secondly, we also had another product which we call it washable 3-in-1. So very simply, we gave him a kit. In that kit, the paint was done, and we gave him two things. We gave him a sauce pouch, and we gave him a lipstick. And we told him that if you take a normal paint and put it, if you ever rub, lipstick stains never go away, or the sauce stains go very difficult. But if you just rub, it will go delivered. So what we tried to do was convert science, use science knowledge, because this is all chemical industry knowledge, which is converted to a consumer understanding examples of the tools, and there would be many of them. A marketing, very simple marketing innovation is that if you go to a pan wala showroom today, have you ever seen 1 rupee or a 5 rupee? Now it's 5 rupees. 5 rupee shampoo sachets hanging. So if you see, they have those shampoo sachets which you can buy at 5 rupee or a 10 rupee or whatever that SKU says. So if you step out of India, and if some of you were traveled out of India, you never find that small sachet out of India. So in India, one of the reasons there is a low penetration of soaps and detergents is that the SKU cost is very high. As a result, you assume there is an aspiration of a lower middle class segment to use Dove, but Dove is quite expensive, so it remains an aspiration. So how does a marketer bring that for a consumer for trial? What he does, or what they did, this was actually not done by either Procter & Gamble or Hindustan Unilever. This theme was done by a company called Chick Shampoo down south, because they could not get shelf space. But what they actually did was they created a small pouch which did not require space to hang. You could hang it by a thread, but it is in your eye when you go to a shop. So it was effectively a marketing innovation done to attract consumers to drive trial and usage in a consumer space. And after that, all the global leaders adopted it. So I think
was a very
many examples, but this sort of comes to very quickly to mind. I can give you a few more, but this is a very example which I think really changed the way marketing, SKU marketing is driven by this large FMCG industry.
Yes, so we agree. Your examples gave me a very new perspective on the very definition of innovation and how it can be incorporated and inculcated in both industry and scientific world. Now, we as students are told the importance of innovation and out of the box thinking from a very young age. How exactly do you think is this particular knowledge important in the corporate world? And can you elucidate on the importance of innovation and what would happen if the corporate world did not have innovation and tried to survive solely by conventional methods which the other corporate industries have been following?
So I think most companies follow what, in my terminology, I call a $1 innovation. So typically what they do is they create an innovation by spending $1 and earn $2 out of it. So typically that is how they create value for themselves. iPhone, for example, technically all of you are, you know the gadgets more than I would do at my generation, but between iPhone 11 and 10, or let's say 11 Pro or whatever it is, barring the camera, there is incremental change. Or let's say between 11 and 12, you are moving from 4G to 5G, but India doesn't have a 5G, but people still buy 12 Pro. So what they've done is they've spent an X amount of rupee and taken maybe 1.5 or 2X value out of it. So that's how corporate normally drive innovation. And the reason is very simple. So it is not easy to find white spaces in product solutions available today. And unless you find a white space, you would struggle to find a breakthrough innovation. So iPad, for example, is a white space available between a phone and a laptop, where a convenience of laptop and handy of a phone was found as a white space, and Apple came and took the market away. Now, and there are, I would say, corporates are in some sense to be blamed for it, because there are always budget, cost pressures, and other things, etc. But we also, what we miss out typically when we do innovation is, there is this concept called design thinking. So design thinking looks at innovation in a very different manner. So if you want to innovate, you normally would say, I want to create something new. That's what people come with. But I think the innovation starts with having a deep empathy with the consumer and finding what is his need gap, and then trying and finding solutions to fulfill the need gap. Unfortunately, if you start from saying that I have this, toolbox available, and I would like to create the best of the toolbox, you're thinking as a technologist, as a scientist, as a marketeer, but where is the heart of the, or where is the core of the consumer in? It is normally not there. So if you guys ever get to read about this concept called design thinking. Design thinking actually helps you go to the core of how to look at innovation, find the white spaces, and if you do that well, there is a good chance that you will be able to latch up into a breakthrough innovation. To make it successful is the next realm of business work, but typically to find the spaces. That's how we would do if it. But as I said earlier, most people would look at doing an incremental $1 innovation, because that's the bread and butter of good corporates today.
Okay, sir. Following up on this, since you mentioned company dynamics, how can a company possibly increase the reach and build a large consumer base to reach out to a larger audience?
I think, look, if I look at from, let's say, take it from an India perspective, just for our understanding, and then we can look at global requirements. As long as a company understands its consumers well, it would have, and it addresses those needs, it would have solutions available to the customers, for the consumers. Now, it also needs not only to understand what a customer needs well, it also needs to understand how do customers buy products. So, for example, let's take an example today. Let's assume for a moment that there were no Amazon and Flipkarts of the world, right? Now, if you were to ever buy, let's say, let's take an example like a phone. How many kilometers would you travel to buy a phone? Just assume a situation there is no Amazon or Flipkart. I don't think you would travel 25 kilometers to buy a phone. So if the phone is not available within 5 kilometers to your place, then, or 7-10 kilometers for your space, maybe you would not go for that brand. Now just replicate this situation into a tier 3 town in India, where Amazon may not be always reaching out. We are all lucky to be in metros. Now, if a company might have a product, the reason I'm giving an example, a company might have a product, but does not have designed a wherewithal to reach the last mile connectivity to a customer, then it would fail. So it either fails on product development of understanding customer needs, or it fails on availability of the product when the customer requires. And in the end, it finally ends up, it could even fail on the price. You do everything right, but you price it astronomical price, it fails. So I think the corporate needs to, for it to expand its product portfolio to a larger audience, you need to cover all these. These are classically marketers call it 4Ps, but I think it's very simply making it available at the point that the person would need at the price he needs, and in the method that he would need.
Thank you, sir. You talked about various innovations and even small innovations that create a huge impact on the company. So, how do these innovations exactly come from? Is it a natural tendency of a person to be innovative, or it can be acquired via practice and experience in that particular field?
Okay, so I think innovation, in my personal view, is not in the realms of certificates and degrees. And we have very strong examples where workmen on the shop floor have given innovative ideas. I have had situations where the door, the security guard has come and given us innovation ideas. I think it's important for us because humans have a very fertile mind. They would need keep on thinking. I think you need to have an organizational process around it. I work in a Japanese company. We follow this concept called Kaizen, continuous improvement. So Kaizen is nothing about identifying learning incidences and or finding opportunities in your daily work and finding improvement. And each of this improvement, when you connect as a larger group, then you are able to make an innovative, action out of it. So I'll give you an example. With this COVID happening around, we were following some security protocols wherein we were extensively asking all our employees to be, we would give them a fresh mask to wear every day, and the mask had to be deposited in a certain place because it's a biohazard when you are using a mask. So imagine a factory with 400 people given a fresh piece of mask every day, and everybody and given 2 masks in a day, first shift, second shift, before lunch, after lunch. So end of the day, you're creating 800 masks, and then you have 3 shifts, so you're creating 2,400 masks down. Now, how do you, what do? You just throw it in the garbage, the guy would come in, but you're still creating a problem. So one of the workmen came us, they gave us a solution about how to use incinerators to, convert this mask into sanitized fabric, which could be used for, not medical use, for other use, etc. And we've sort of started using. And this idea did not come up by the head of R&D or head of technology. It came from a workman. So so I think, as I said, it can come from anybody. How would company make this more fertile is you need to have a very strong culture of allowing people to communicate, to share observations, to share ideas, and also a culture where you make people believe that no idea is a stupid idea. I think the starting point of so as I was talking about design phase, so the first phase of design thinking is called empathy, which says nothing is a stupid idea. And in any group dynamics that I'm sure you would also see, uh, there are people who are very active participants and there are people who are passive thinkers. Now, people who are passive speakers are not generally the people who would not know. Maybe they have a lot of good ideas, but just because they are afraid to speak out or not given a chance to speak out, or they feel that their ideas would be rubbished, as a result, we would sidestep them or don't give them a chance. So, if you are giving people a due chance and giving them a confidence that there's nothing called a stupid idea, then I'm sure some of these stupid ideas can be used by another person to create a more exciting idea, and then the team could create, I would say, a workable idea. So that culture is very critical for innovation to continue in an.
Thank you, sir. That was a very inspiring story that you told us. And you mentioned in your answer that an innovation was suggested by a workman, which really helped you to improve the management of masks in the company. So this particular example, I think, clearly illustrates that innovation is a very important element in order to refine the quality of any job or organization. So, how exactly do you think innovation begins? If someone is completely new to a particular field, how does one start being innovative? Or what does one do? What are the personal attributes one should start practicing which lead to innovation?
Actually, I feel that people who are completely new to a field are better innovators because you are not bound by predefined ethos that you studied, you experienced, or that you've been coached to live through a life. So all of us, as we do our career journey, we have certain do's and don'ts. Similarly, in our education, like, when you're studying physics, we are clearly told, this is what Newton said, this is what this said. So we are all our boundaries well defined, and we are conditioned to think in those boundaries. And you would say this is right or not, that is right. So I think somewhere people who land up into a new role, and I've done 3 or 4 different organizations and a few different roles. I've always believed when I've landed fresh into a role, I come from a different perspective and there is a different situation. When you marry the two, you get a chance to think that if this could happen in a different manner. So that is a critical element which should not be suppressed, which is something which should continue and should be sort of encouraged, and that would allow innovation to go forward. So if, for example, let's take an example where I was reading about an automobile company. So I don't remember which one. I think it was one of those German ones. I used to handle one of them as a key account manager at some point in time, and I was talking to a design engineer then. This is around 7 or 8 years back, and he said, we'd invite truck drivers to advise us on a car. So I was quite surprised, and I said, why do you do so? He says, because those guys know how to handle rugged vehicles, and we want to get there in the idea about it. And then another guy said, look, he's a guy who's sitting at a height and he knows when he hits my car what will happen. So just look at the way somebody who was designing was approaching, because he was looking at, if my car is hit at a height of 3.5 feet, it could impact my car badly, and hence I need to make my roof structure of my roof far more stronger, because I might have an impact opportunity because of this insight that the truck driver is given. So did the truck driver contribute to innovation? He definitely did. Is he a well qualified, certified automobile expert? Definitely not. But he had an experience with him, which was harnessed very sensibly by the design engineer. So I think these are examples where you could continuously roll in innovation, and also roll in innovation where you are not knowledgeable about an industry. And what a lot of companies do, for example, is there's a marketing technique called focus group discussions. So typically they would get their consumers to come together and talk about products and give them an example. Let me give you a simple example. Let's assume you're launching a brand of watches, and you are saying that this brand of watches is targeted at young, upwardly mobile females. So if you were to bring those, set of consumer profiles together and get them to talk about luxury, for example, their cues on luxury will give you insights about how they interpret luxury in jewelry, and then you can interpret them into watches. So you had people who had nothing to do with your product, who gave you insights, but it was important for you to draw inferences from those insights and connect to your innovation. So I would normally, so I have taken few, I would say, lectures, or you can call sessions on innovation and strategy with a couple of management colleges. And I always encourage students and tell them, when you are doing something which is innovative, always create a group which is very diverse, and always allow diverse views to seep in and help build on those views. That would give you a far better product than same set of minds working together. Even if you go to a college, if you go to a hospital, they try and get doctors from different, specializations together to give an opinion, because they bring their own set of view, and sometimes a commonality helps. So that's how not being part of the same industry, organization, etc., may also support innovation.
Definitely, sir. I'm able to connect this with the theoretical science that we study. Even Albert Einstein, by asking certain stupid question like "What is time?" made a breaking theories on relativity, and these led to innovations in the field of science and technology. So now we come to the last question. In industry, especially in our country, there have been various changes, especially due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So, what do you think is the future of Indian industry uh, in the next 5 years? And will these changes continue? And what kind of changes will happen in the industry?
So I'll divide your question in two parts, Himanshu. One linked to changes in industry as a result of COVID-19, and long-term view on what you're talking in the industry. Look, COVID-19 has fundamentally changed uh, in a lot of essence the way we work. The use of technology has gone to a very different level. For example, uh, I run a manufacturing company where our customers are out there in the market, and typically we would have been interacting with customers even at my level on a very regular basis, maybe 5 6 days in a month or something like that. And being in an office was very critical because of the nature of the industry. We are dealing with chemicals and stuff like that. And 75% of us were working at home for last 3 months, or now for 15 months for a lot of people. Now, just because of adoption of technology, not only in the way we communicate, but also in the way we address our processes in office. So when people travel today, they expend money. When they expend money, they need to claim it back from the company. So typically in a company, they use pen and paper to fill vouchers. Now, even if they fill electronically, somebody has to ratify it, and that ratification requires an approval, and then the payment happens. So if all of this has become automated, it has eliminated jobs, but it has also brought some efficiency. So I think what I mean to say is there is the shift of to automation and use of technology is something which is here to stay, which is good because it also delivers productivity. Uh, the culture of 5 days, 6 days a week would not. I think it will evolve into a hybrid culture because people finally want to meet each other. They get sick of sitting at home, so it could change on that manner. So there would be similarly in industries which require a lot of B2B customer interaction like ours, we are moving using technology tools to actually not go to a customer's site but address his technological problems. So in summary, the technology will drive a lot of behavioral change in the way industry would work going forward in future. But it will not completely shift because there is always a fatigue with technology in a certain cross section of people. So there would be a mix of it. That would be the change which has happened. Uh, there would always be two sets of organization, one which would adapt the change and drive the change, and some would be laggard in the change. And I think that would create a wider chasm between the two organizations. The one which would drive the change would be the one which would be adapted to the new technology faster. And that I think is going to happen not only in India but globally. It's already happening. In terms of what would happen to industry in India, India has historically been a self-consuming economy. I think we roughly consume 70% of what we produce. We have very limited export base. And we are not a very large manufacturing set of organization or a country, sorry, not organization, country, unlike like a China or even for that matter, a country like Vietnam or something like that. This change of this impact of COVID has made a lot of the corporates, including ours, uh, look at productivity in a far deeper sense because last year was a decline year for most companies, but companies did declare profit. So companies did a lot of productivity exercises, which is good because that has made Indian companies more competitive to the global companies. India always lacked infrastructure and productivity in its in its companies and its manufacturing setup. So I think that's happened well. If worked, if this whole situation is invested well and grown well, I'm sure as your generation goes into corporate world, you will have a far wider corporate world to work with than what we had or even today.
Thank you so much, sir. That was a very enriching experience for our team and is certain to help us in the future, in our future endeavors. Not only in this competition, but also beyond that, when we're working in different organizations ourselves. The fact that you mentioned so many examples really made us imagine the particular scenario and understand the intricacies of the corporate world in a more practical sense. So, once again, thank you so much for sparing some of your time for us and giving us such an insightful experience. We're so glad that you were there with us today.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. All the best to both of you and your team.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Stay safe.